Well, hello Internet, and welcome to part 17 of my Android development tutorial. Today I'm going to talk about how to interact with multiple Android fragments. Also, we're going to cover how to use fragments on devices that support Android level 4 and later. And on top of that, we're also going to cover how to use a different number of fragments depending upon the screen resolution. And if you didn't watch any of the previous tutorials, I provide a link in the upper right hand corner. You most definitely should check out part 16 before watching this because I cover the basics of fragments in that part. And of course, all of the code is available in the description just like always. So I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Okay, so unlike most of my tutorials, this one is actually going to, for the most part, come from the Apache Foundation, which wrote an absolutely perfect tutorial on how to interact with multiple different fragments. And what we're going to have here is a lipsum.java class that I created here. And I made some changes, but nothing that dramatic. And what this guy's going to do for us is it's going to contain two string arrays, and they are going to contain both the headlines as well as the articles. The headlines are going to go on the left side of the screen, and the articles on the right side of the screen, if they can fit on the device. In a situation in which they can't, the headlines are going to show up in a fragment and take up the whole screen. And whenever a headline is clicked on, said article is going to pop up on the screen thereafter. And to set something like that up, we actually are going to have two different folders. One of them is going to be layout, and one is going to be layout large. And I'm going to create all of the code that goes into these in this tutorial. Layout large is going to contain both fragments, and then article view and news articles is only going to contain individual data. So now let's go into dimensions.xml and define some dimensions we're going to need. So I'm just going to go dimension name is equal to, and I'm going to define article view padding. And I'm going to set this up so that it's independent pixels so that it will easily scale regardless of the resolution of the device. And I'm also going to set text size, and I'm going to have this be 18 SP just because it looks good. And there we are, we're done with dimensions.xml. Now we have to define the news article, and this is going to all be in a frame layout. And what a frame layout basically does is blocks off part of the screen, and then what we're going to do is put a list view and a group of list items that are going to represent all of our articles. And the ultimate size of our frame layout is going to depend on the largest child or the article with the longest name. And basically, all we need to do is just throw in a frame layout, define it that way, give it a name, which is going to be fragment container, and then define the width and the height in a generic way. And that is all we need to do with news articles. And that's going to bring us to the article view, which is actually going to display said articles when they are clicked on. And inside of this guy, I'm going to have just a text view. That's it. And then we can go in here and define an ID for this guy. And then I'm going to call this article. And then because it's new, I'm going to put a plus sign inside of there. I'm going to bounce over into news articles and just borrow these widths and heights because they're going to work for me. Paste those in there. And then we're going to come down here and define the padding that I actually created in the dimensions. And to get that, of course, we go at dimen / and then I'll bounce over here, get the padding, article, view padding, jump back inside of here, paste that inside of that. And then we're also going to do, of course, the same thing for our text size. So change this to text size, and then this one is just going to be changed from padding to text size. And there we go. That is all set up, and I'll just indent that to make it look pretty. And there we go. That is the end of articleview.xml. Then what we need to do for our larger resolution devices is we're going to come in here and define both fragments all in one place. And all of this is going to be put inside of a linear layout, and everything here is pretty much default. And to put these fragments in, which we're going to create later on in their own class files, we're going to go fragment Android name is equal to, now we haven't created this yet, so we're going to have to put com example Android fragments, and I'm going to call it headlines fragment, and that is going to be the class name, which we're going to create here in a little bit. And I'm actually going to have both fragments at the same time here, and I'm actually going to create them at the same time. Paste that in there because we're going to be doing a lot of the same things. Well, then I have to actually give an ID to this fragment. Come in here and select that, just save some time. And this guy's going to be called headlines underscore fragment. And again, this is a new guy I'm creating here, so I'm going to put a plus sign inside of it. Then I want the actual articles or headlines to only take up 1/3 of our screen. So of course, I'm going to use LayoutWeight, which was nice enough to come up there and see me. And I'm going to throw a 1 in there. And you could guess this is going to be a 2 down here. And then to enforce that and make sure that it only pays attention to what I define in weight, I'm going to go layout width and define that as 0 dp, density independent pixels, say, right there. And then for our height, I'm just going to come up here and copy this guy and paste that in there. And then close off that fragment definition right there. Then I'm going to do pretty much the same thing down here. Throw that down there. Except this guy, of course, is going to be article fragment. And this one's also going to be article fragment. Weight, I want this to take up 2/3 of the screen, so that's going to be a 2. Make sure that is set for 0. And match parent works there as well. So that's going to handle whenever we are at higher resolutions with our device. So pretty cool. Now what I'm going to do is jump into headlines fragment and create the fragment. So here I am, and the headlines fragment, like I mentioned before, is going to extend the list fragment. And then of course I'm going to come in here and import Android support version 4. Make sure you get that. And if I didn't mention it before, what this is going to allow us to do is use fragments on devices that are going to support Android level 4 and later. So make sure you get that one. And now that I have that defined, what I'm going to do to save myself just a bit of time is I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to come in here to source, come over here, come down here, and look for override implement methods. I'm actually going to be using a whole bunch of fragment methods inside of this guy, so we have to open that up. And what I'm going to specifically be pulling out from there is on create, this guy right here, so just put a check in there. Also going to get on start, so select that, and I'm also going to want on attach, which is right there. And then after we have that all set up, I'm going to set this for first member and hit OK. And that is going to create all of my little guys inside of here. I want on create first. Seems like every time I do this, I do that. And paste that inside of there. Now, before I get to all of those different guys, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually create an interface that is going to allow my activities and fragments to talk to each other. And I'm going to store that in on headline selected listener, which I'm going to define here in a second. I'm going to call this on callback. Then I have to actually create the interface, public interface, and then it's going to be on headline selected listener. And then to work with this fragment, we're going to make sure that this function on article selected is created and used, and the position is going to represent whatever article is currently clicked on or was previously clicked on. So the containing activity in this situation must implement this interface so that our fragments will be able to deliver messages whenever things are clicked on. And that's all we're going to need to do from there. We're going to go into on create. I'm going to get rid of this to do so that I don't clutter up my Eclipse. And of course, like always, on create's just going to initialize the fragment for us. And the very first thing we're going to do is define layout. And what this is going to do is store the text view layout ID for us. Save us some space. R layout simple list item 1. There we go. And now what we're going to need to do is create a list adapter, which is going to populate the list view for us with the information that was in the arrays inside of the Lipsum class, which is right up here. And to do that, we're going to say set list adapter, and then we're going to have to create ourselves a new array adapter, and it's going to hold strings, and the array adapter is going to specifically deal with the arrays for us. But to do that, we have to go get activity, which gets us an intent so that we'll be able to start a new activity. And then we're going to pass inside of here the text view layout ID, which we defined above. And then finally, going to define the actual arrays that we want to use, headlines, like that. And of course, we're going to have to come in here and get ourselves a couple libraries. And that's all we're going to need to do with on create for our headlines fragment. So we'll have to come in here now to on attach. And of course, this is going to be called whenever the fragment is attached to an activity. This is basically going to be really simple. All we're going to do here is we are going to verify that the activity that is going to use this fragment has implemented the interface that I defined right here. So we need to check to make sure that is true. And one way to check that is to go on callback and try to cast it to on headline selected listener. If it implements it, then we're not going to have a problem. And then pass in activity. And if we have a problem with that, well, we want to catch it. And the problem would be class cast exception, because we're trying to cast to something that may not exist. And if that happens, we want to throw new class cast exception and maybe add ourselves a little bit more information. Activity to string. And then down here we'll say something like must implement on headline selected listener, and then close that off. And there we go. That's all we're going to have to do for on attach. Now for on start, which is going to be called when the fragment is made visible on our screen, we're going to need to check if both the article names as well as the articles themselves, those fragments, both fragments are on the screen at the same time. And if they are, it would make sense to highlight the selected current article that is being displayed. And how we find that out is we're going to say get Fragment Manager, and we're going to say, and the get Fragment Manager, all that's going to do is return the Fragment Manager to us, which of course, like we talked about previously, is going to allow us to interact with the fragments associated with whatever the current activity is. Then we're going to say find fragment by ID, and we're specifically going to look for our article fragment, because we're inside of headlines fragment. So if we can find that, we know what's going on, and we want to check that it's not equal to null. And if that is true, we're going to say get list view, and of course get list view gets us the list view that we need. And then we're going to say set choice mode and go list view choice mode single, select that, and that's just going to only allow us to select one item at a time. So that's what that's for, because it wouldn't make sense to have more than one article available, because that's not possible. And that's all we need to do for on start. Now we basically have to handle whenever a list item would be clicked and what we want to do. So I'm going to go on list item click, and this guy's going to have list view, and we're going to want position, and those are just default attributes. And whenever it's clicked on, we want to go mCallback on article selected and pass inside of it the position or the current article that was selected. And then we're going to go get list view and set the item as checked, or let's make sure that the article is highlighted if we're in a two-pane layout. So set item checked for whatever the current item is, and set this to true. And there we go. And that's going to handle everything we're going to need for our headlines fragment. And that's going to take us to our article fragments, which are actually going to hold the articles. And for this guy, public class article fragment, and this guy is going to extend fragment for us. And we're just going to come in here again and right click just about anywhere, go into source just like we did before, come over here, come down here, override implement methods, and we'll get a whole bunch of them here on our screen. One thing we're going to want is on create view. Just scroll through here, and there it is. Check that guy. We're also going to want on start, select that guy. On saved instance state is going to be good as well, because we're going to want to pass positions around. And that should be it, so let's hit OK. And there we go, have all of them in there. And then before we go into on create view, we're going to create ourselves a string here. And it is going to be the current article that is selected. And this specifically is going to be passed back and forth between the fragments. And that's going to be our position. And then also we're going to define pretty much that same thing, but it's just going to be within this class. And it's just going to be the current position. And start off, let's just make that -1. And like I said, that's just going to be used to track the current article within the class. Then inside of on create view, what we need to do here is check if the activity was created, for example, from a screen rotate. What we're going to want to do is restore the previous article that was selected, and of course that information is going to come from on save instance state. And this is mainly going to be used with the two-pane layout, because otherwise it's not going to be needed. And to do that, we're going to go saved instance state is not equal to null, and we're going to go get the current position, set it for this specific object or class, And how we're going to do that, or how we're going to get that, is go saved instance state, and we're going to say get int and arg position, like that. And now we'll know that. And then down here, we got to make a couple little changes. Just get rid of this altogether. What we're going to be doing here is calling the inflator, and it is going to inflate our fragment into the activity. And we're going to have to say our layout, and then we're going to, of course, use the article view, because that's what we are working with, the article fragment, and then pass inside of it container and false. And there we go, all set up. And then, of course, we have to come in here and spell inflator right. I do that all the time. And there we go. So that's all set up. Now I'm going to come down here to on start, get that fixed. And basically what we're going to do here is create a bundle. And of course bundles are used to pass information back and forth between different activities. And we're going to see if we can get those potential values. And basically the reason why we're going to do this in on start is because the layout has already been applied to the fragment at this point. So we know that we can safely call different methods below so that we'll be able to set our article text. But we do want to come in here and check if the article has been selected, check if it's not null, and if it wasn't, we're going to go update article view and set the article based off of whatever the argument that was passed in here, which is the position, or the article that should be displayed. And to get that, we're going to say get int and say arg position, and that's going to return an int. And then we're going to create update article view here in a second. Otherwise, I'm going to say else if mCurrent position is not equal to -1. Remember, we set that before. In that situation, we're going to update article view with whatever the current version or value for current position is for said object or class that we're working with here right now. And that's giving us errors because update article view hasn't been defined yet. So let's go define it. And basically what this guy's going to do is put the text for whatever the currently selected article is inside of the article text view. Void update article view. Of course it gets the currently selected article. There that is. And it's going to go text view. And the text view is going to be our article. So we're dealing with this guy. This article view.xml. This guy. Jump back over here. And to get it, we're going to say get activity. And then find view by ID. And that specific view is going to be article. And then what we do is go article and set text with data that's in the Lipsum class. To get it, we just go articles and pass in position. And then current position is also going to, we want to make sure that it also has the same value as the current position. And the only thing we didn't do was set up on saved instance state, which is this guy. And what we're going to do with this is go out state, put int arg position, and it's going to contain whatever the current position is. The current article selected, that value is going to be stored inside of there, of course, in case our app is accidentally shut off or it's rotated. And that brings us to MainActivity, the very, very, very last guy. And of course, we're going to go public class, MainActivity, and this is going to extend FragmentActivity, because we're going to be using fragments here. And then what else is it going to do? It needs to implement the headlines interface that we defined inside of here so that we'll be able to communicate whenever things are clicked on. So go and get that guy, jump back over, implements, and there that is. And then for FragmentActivity, again, we're going to make sure we get the Android support library, the right one. There we go. And then we're also going to want to come in here and go headlines fragment to reference that. And of course this is going to say add unimplemented methods, and we click on that. And there is the specific method we have to use if we're going to implement this interface. But first, there's a couple other different things I want to do here. I'm going to go and get some other different methods that I'm going to need for FragmentActivity. So again, source, come down here, override implement methods. And then of course we're going to need on create. So select that. And for now, that's all I'm going to take. Click OK. And there is on create for us. So whenever this activity is created for us, we need to set up everything properly. I'm going to change this to saved instance state, like that. And then of course we're going to have saved instance state down below. And then we also want to set our content view, which is going to be our layout. And we're going to say news articles. There's that guy. Then what we need to do is check whether this activity is going to be using the layout version with the fragment container frame layout. And if it is, we need to add that first fragment. So we're going to say if find view by ID, pass inside of it, ID, fragment container. See, this guy right here over in newsarticles.xml. That's what we're looking for. Bounce back over here. Then we're going to check if it's not equal or not null. And then what we need to do inside of this is go saved instance state. And in the situation in which we are restoring from a previous state, well, we're not going to then need to do anything, and we should just go and return from that. And this is very important because if we don't do this, if we don't check that this information is already on here or these fragments are already on the screen, it may actually throw more fragments on the screen. So we always want to make sure that we check that. And we'll just click return in that situation and get out of this altogether. Otherwise, we're going to create an instance of the fragment that's going to hold all of the titles for all of our fragments, or otherwise create a headlines fragment object. And I'm going to call this first fragment, which is going to be equal to new headlines fragment. Then what we need to do is to check if there's any information out there like the current article that was selected. And to do that, we go get intent and then go get extras. And that's going to get any extra information that was passed in whenever this guy was called. And then we have to add the fragment to the fragment container. To do that, we go get support and get ourselves a fragment manager. And then we're going to call begin transaction because we need to do this before we begin editing fragments in any way. And then we're going to go add our fragment container. And specifically first fragment, and then to keep this nice, we're just going to say commit, which is going to say, hey, whenever you get a chance to do this, do it. And that brings us to on what exactly we're going to do whenever an article is selected. Well, we're going to say article fragment and capture the article fragment from the activity layout. And to do that, we're going to say get our fragment manager again, and then we're going to specifically get that fragment by ID, and it's going to be r.id article fragment. Then, after we have that, we want to check if the article fragment is here, and if it is, we want to have it update itself. And it's going to update itself by calling update article view, and all we need to do is pass the position, the current article that's selected to that. Else, if not, what we're going to do is use the one pane layout that is just going to show one guy at a time and swap back and forth between the articles themselves and the headline fragment, which has the list of all the possible articles. And to do that, we're going to say article fragment, create a new fragment like this. Then we're going to go bundle so we can get some information. Then we're going to want to save our current article value, and that's going to be available by calling article fragment arg position, and then of course what we're going to put inside of there is whatever the value of position is here. So that's just to store whenever we are bouncing back and forth between the list of articles and the actual articles themselves. Then new fragment is going to be ready to set arguments with that bundle to pass that information back and forth, and then we're going to create our fragment transaction, which is going to allow us to add and remove, replace, and do animations and so forth with fragments, just like I talked about before. And we just have to go get support. We have to go and get ourselves a fragment manager again, like we've been doing here a whole bunch of times, and say, hey, we'd like to start doing some things, which means we need to do what? Begin transaction. And for this guy, of course, we're going to want to go and get our updated libraries. Or is it? There it is. Okay, got that. And I was remembering an old Android thing here. Whoop. And of course, this is get support fragment manager. There we are. Sorry about that. Then we're going to have to go into the transaction and replace whatever is in the fragment container view with our new fragment. And to do that, we go replace RID fragment container, because remember, these fragments can actually be put on top of each other, which is a bad thing. And we want our new fragment inside of there. And then what we need to do is call transaction again. And this time we're going to call add to backstack and pass in null. And this just causes the transaction that we created here to be remembered. And then after I got all that set up, I just need to commit. Say get to this whenever you get a chance. And that's it. That was a whole ton of different things. But if we now go up inside of here, and I actually created a new device. So I have a couple different devices. Here is my old emulator, and this is a new emulator, and this one's going to be a lower resolution, and it is going to allow us to demonstrate how to actually use just one fragment at a time versus using multiple fragments at a time. And I'm actually going to use that lower resolution device here and then let you guys go and get the code. I'm going to provide the whole entire package in the description for this video, and you'll be able to go and test it on different things and see how it changes. But we're going to come in here, we're going to go run configurations just like always. And to test our new device, we're going to go into Target. I've been asked about this a couple times. If you want to use a different device, like I'm going to shut this off and say, no, I want the lower resolution because I want to see what that looks like. And just like always, you're going to have your project and you're going to select your main activity and click Run. And here you can see what it's going to look like on a lower resolution device. See, we're going to be able to switch back and forth this way, but it's not going to show the articles at the same time. And what the heck, I'll show you what it looks like on a higher resolution device. All we're going to do, jump up here again, run configurations. This pops up, and let's change our target to the higher resolution. Everything else is exactly the same, and run it. And here we are on a higher resolution device, and you can see that in this situation, if you click on the different titles, that it shows everything on one screen. So that was a massive tutorial covering a ton of different things. Please leave any questions or comments below. Otherwise, till next time.